And I'm sure everyone else, is so delighted that we at least can see you this way. We're sorry we don't have you in person, but we're looking forward very much to what you have to say today. So thank you, Joe, for being with us, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you for that introduction, Scooter. I'm delighted to be with you this morning, so let's get going. Well, here we are. We have arrived at the center. The Nancy Penn Center, of course. Now, where is the center located, and what does it mean to come to the center? Well, if you think you know where the center is and what it means to be there, you may recall that not too long ago, in a galaxy not too far away, there was some controversy about this. So let's talk about cosmology. What is cosmology? The science of the origin and development of the universe. More precisely, it's the study of the order of the universe or celestial bodies, from the Greek word cosmos, which means order. It comes to mean the order of the universe, and logos, which means word, reason, principle, or study of. Because, for most people, cosmology is often distinguished from cosmogony, which is the theory of the origin of the universe, the world, especially our little solar system. Also from the Greek word cosmos, which means order, and gonia, which means to beget or begetting. So what's the relationship between cosmology and cosmogony? Well, I think of cosmology as kind of our mental map of the universe. And cosmogony has to do with how that universe came to be and where it might be going. So one is spatial and one is temporal. So you see those rock'em sock'em robots? It's not that they're opposed, it's more like they're those nice little birds. They're fast friends. So it's not really verses, it's cosmology and cosmogony. So let's take a little tour of cosmological history. Where does it all begin? Well, the Babylonians, yes, they were among the first cosmologists. And they were among the first astronomers, and yes, Scooter, astrologers. They did not distinguish between astronomy and astrology because they wanted to know what it all meant down here, what was going on up there, as above, so below. So they observed the universe, they drew some maps, came to certain interesting conclusions, though, with their mathematics and their observations. And basically what they thought about was that the whole universe, the world, was kind of like an egg sitting in cosmic amniotic fluid. And it had basically 6 layers. So 3 above, 3 below, and the Earth in the middle. The Earth in the center. There's a couple of more pictures. So the universe has 6 levels, 3 heavens, 3 earths. And then there was the flat Earth, basically flat, created as a kind of raft floating in the middle of the freshwater oceans in the center of the world, the unmoving center of the world. And then there was the underworld of the dead, where all the spirits of the dead went, all surrounded by the cosmic ocean. And that raft was created by that god there, Marduk, who also happens to be associated with the planet Jupiter, which, as we'll see, will also play an interesting role a little bit later on with a fellow by the name of Galileo. Now, as the agricultural revolution spread from the Near East, so that cosmology, that Babylonian cosmology that was worked out, that kind of strange idea that the world is a little 6 or 3-layer cake or a kind of egg in cosmic amniotic fluid, that cosmology goes with the spread of agriculture. So the culture goes with the technology. And where does it go? Well, it goes to Greece. There you see the Greek picture of the universe. It's quite similar, isn't it? And there you see the cosmic ocean surrounding the world, the Earth in the middle, the firmament with the stars, right? You see the stars, the moon, and the sun is contained within that little globe. It's a nice little intimate world. And that underworld, that's the place for the kingdom of Hades. You know, Hades drew the short straw and got that little dark place. Zeus and the others got to be upstairs in Olympus. Apollo was the god of the sun, and the idea was that he took that sun, the home of which was in the underworld, and put it in his chariot every day and drove it across the sky from east to west and back down to the underworld. So, interestingly, Apollo was not only the god of light, the god of reason, truth, harmony, but also the god who sent you dreams at night, because he knew not only about the light in the light, but also the light in the dark. There's the same image in the Bible. So if you didn't know what Genesis was talking about when it was talking about the firmament and all that stuff, well, it's the Babylonian cosmology that they had in mind in both what's called the Old Testament and New Testament. And there you see the underworld with its Hebrew name, Sheol, right? You see the bounded flat earth in the middle, the heavens above, and then the pillars of the world all surrounded by the cosmic ocean, all kind of very intimate and nice, right? Well, this lasted a long time, this cosmology, until, well, before we get to that point, yes. So what does Genesis say? God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together in one place, and let the dry land appear. Let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and to give light upon the earth. So the whole world, the whole universe was created for the earth. The earth was in the center of things. So you've got to remember this, because something really strange happens next. What happened? Well, and now for something completely different. How different? This fellow, Ptolemy, an ethnic Greek living in Alexandria, Egypt in the 2nd century, took some ideas that he borrowed from Aristotle, took some of the stuff that he borrowed from the Babylonians and his own calculations, and came to the conclusion that the earth is the unmoving center of the universe, all right, but his picture was a little different. So Ptolemy's idea was that the earth is a perfect because divine sphere, the unmoving center of the universe, and the other planets, 5 were known, plus the moon and the sun, and even the so-called fixed stars revolved around the earth in perfectly circular orbits, because all of these celestial bodies were embedded in kind of crystalline spheres. So you get the picture, right? So the earth is in the center, just like the Babylonians thought, but instead of a flat surface, basically flat, it's a perfectly spherical object, celestial object. And actually, his calculations were so close that he came within a few thousand miles. He did this all by mathematics. And within a few thousand miles, he got the circumference of the earth. The reason that he made some errors was because the earth is not perfectly circular, but is fatter, like a middle-aged man who has a tire around his stomach. The earth is fatter in the middle. Here's another nice picture of Ptolemy's cosmology. So, to compare them, as I said, the Babylonian view and Ptolemy's view are similar, and they're both geocentric. Geo from Gaia, or Geo, the ancient Greek goddess of earth. And unlike, again, Ptolemy, following Aristotle, he held that the earth is a perfectly round sphere, and it's fixed, it's the unmoving center of the world, around which the other planets and even the 1,022 stars that were cataloged revolve in perfectly circular patterns. Now, and then what happens? And now for something very, very different. We had this fellow come along, a new troublemaker, that Polish philosopher, astronomist, Nick Copernicus. And what was his idea? Does anyone want to take a guess? Yes. It's the sun. The sun is in the center, not the earth. The earth is only the 3rd planet from the sun, and there you have everything revolving stationary around the stationary sun, right? So this is the shift, the great controversy. There's another picture of it. And you see Jupiter out there? When Galileo, the first person to look through a telescope, looked at Jupiter, he noticed something strange. That is strange if you believed in Ptolemy, because since everything was supposed to revolve around the earth, what Galileo noticed was that Jupiter's moons were revolving around, guess what? Jupiter. And when he told his inquisitors, well, if you don't believe me, you look through the telescope, they said, no, that's the devil's instrument. So he got into trouble for this, as you know. He was brought before the Inquisition in 1632. He'd already been warned in 1615 about this. And there was another Italian philosopher who was also a priest and a monk, who who was also called by the Inquisition to Rome, and he really did not want to go. And they invited him, and it's one of those offers he couldn't refuse. And when he got there, they held a barbecue in his honor. And guess what? He was the barbecue. Yes, he was burned alive at the stake in the central piazza in Rome in 1600. So, just to put an underline on this, cosmology was serious business. And this is actually part of the charges that were read against Galileo at his Inquisition. Whereas you, Galileo, were denounced in 1615 to this holy office for holding as true a false doctrine taught by many, namely that the sun is immovable in the center of the world, and that the earth moves, following the hypothesis of Copernicus, which is absurd, philosophically false, and formally heretical, because it is expressly contrary to Holy Scriptures. And what about Bruno? Bruno's heresies were even worse. Not only did he also agree with Galileo that Copernicus was right, and the sun is in the center of the world, he went a little bit further because he didn't believe that there was just one world. There was an infinite number of worlds, or what we would call galaxies out there, and therefore, from his standpoint, there is no fixed center anywhere. And not only that, but some of those distant stars are like our sun, and maybe they have their own planetary systems, which have maybe some kind of life, maybe even intelligent life. You see, he believed in E.T. Now, he didn't use that term E.T., of course, but that was the implication. That was one of the reasons why he got into big trouble. And it is a big world after all. There we are, Milky Way. Just how big is the Milky Way? Well, billions and billions, yes, over 100 billion stars. And there's galactic center. As you can see from that little picture, our solar system is out on one of the distant rings. And just how far is it from point A to point B? This is always astonishing to me. So the distance from galactic center, see, we're not in the center of the galaxy, we're not even in the center of our solar system. The distance to galactic center is 26,000 light years, which means, I always have to read this because I always forget these numbers, it would take 26,000 years for light traveling at a speed of 6,000 billion miles per year to get there. So in other words, you need more than a Prius. This is why science fiction writers have to invent things like faster than light travel, because otherwise you would never get anywhere in the universe. Now it's even bigger than that, right? Because here Edwin Hubble comes along, and he's looking at those gaseous clouds, those nebulae that we thought were just surrounding our own galaxy, and he comes to a strikingly different conclusion that those clouds surrounding our galaxy are actually other galaxies. And not only that, but the universe itself is expanding. And so, centuries later, after Bruno was burned at the stake, Hubble comes to the same conclusion. There is no fixed center to the universe, right? And someday, some scientists believe that our nearest galactic neighbor, Andromeda, is, I think, something on the order of 21 or 24 quintillion kilometers away. And in some calculations, since everything is moving in the universe, at some point it could be that our galaxy is going to collide. The Milky Way is going to collide with Andromeda, right? And some scientists call the birth of our universe out of the Big Bang the fortunate accident, and this you could refer to as the unfortunate accident. And I don't know how that slide got in there. I hate when they advertise like that. So what's the takeaway here? What was all this controversy about cosmology in the center? The physical center is symbolic of something, right? To be in the center means what's of central importance, meaning and value. So if the Earth is no longer in the center, it means that a lot of things that we had taken for granted were put into question. Our own importance, our own meaning, our own value, the value of human life is in serious question. This is why this was such a controversy. Furthermore, if we go along with Bruno and Hubble, if there is no fixed center anywhere, then nothing is fixed. There are no absolutes, no absolute meanings, no absolute values, no absolute realities. Everything is in constant flux. Everything is relative and changing, which drove some philosophers to madness. There he is, Friedrich Nietzsche. We all know, we all read, I suppose, at some point, that famous passage. Actually, it occurs in two places in his writings, The Death of God. The madman was really talking about the loss, the absence of a fixed center, right? Whither is God, he cried. I shall tell you, we've killed him, you and I. All of us are his murderers. But how have we done this? How are we able to drink up the sea? Who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What did we do when we unchained this earth from its sun? Whither is it moving now? Whither are we moving now? Away from all suns? Are we not plunging continually? Backward, sideward, forward, in all directions? Is there any up or down left? Are we not straying as through an infinite nothing? So in the beginning there's a fixed center, and now we can't find a center anywhere. Now we have a parallel problem in cosmogony. Remember what cosmogony is? Well, we all have these senior moments now, so I thought I'd put up the definition again. Cosmogony is the theory of the origin of the universe, that is the world, especially the solar system. Again, from the Greek cosmos and gonia, which is begetting. Remember Genesis, right? Genesis. Remember the Babylonians? Remember how the Babylonian idea spread to the Hebrews, to the Greeks, in fact, to what we would call the New World. It spreads all over. Wherever agriculture went, this image of the universe follows. And so we go back to that image of the raft, and you see that raft built up to the center. That is the world mountain. That is also the world tree, which is called axis mundi. It is where things come together. That is the point where creation happens, the center of the center. So Mircea Eliade, the great mythologist, wrote in his book Cosmos and History about the significance of the central mountain and axis mundi. So this is the meeting point between the three cosmic zones, heaven, earth, and the underworld. And its apex is the highest point on earth. So humans go up the mountain, we ascend to the mountain, and the divinities descend. That's the meeting point between the divine and the human. It is the actual metaphysical, ontological omphalos, the navel, the belly button of the earth. And it's the place where creation actually literally began from this standpoint. And as such, it is the zone of absolute reality. So there are some central mountains, some very important sacred mountains. I think you'll recognize them. Here are some more. Mount Meru in India in the Himalayas, Mount Katahdin in Maine, Mount Fuji, Japan, Mount Olympus, of course. And where there aren't any natural mountains, we make them, right? And there you have the ziggurat design going out all over the world, the ziggurat design being with the temple on top. Pyramids are a variation on this, but it's really the image of the central mountain. And again, axis mundi, what is the central mountain and the central world tree? It's where time and eternity, motion and stillness come together. So the world tree, the world mountain are really equivalent symbols. Here's one of my favorite pictures of world tree by one of our own, Diane Waybright. You see the way the three worlds come together, heaven, earth, and the underworld. There are some more famous world trees. I'm sure you'll recognize them. And when we've exhausted trying to look for the center out there in physical world, we go from macro to micro. Because there, going back to the ancient Greeks, we have the idea, well, there's also a center to matter itself. So the physicists want to break everything down to its smallest possible components to get to the center of things at a micro level, right? Because atomos means, in Greek, that which cannot be broken down or divided any further. So if we get down to the atom, then we're getting down to the center of things, aren't we? Well, turns out, nope. Because we know, of course, that we can break an atom down, that an atom has components, and that those components have components, and those components have components have components. So we keep looking for the center at the macro level and the micro level, right? I don't know. It was Higgs boson. What is it? Pentaquarks. I can't follow all this stuff anymore, but there is still this belief that there is an ultimate center, an ultimate subatomic particle, and we're going to get there at some point. So, where's the center? Where's the center of the world? Whose sacred mountain is the central mountain? Which sacred tree is the central tree? And which subatomic particle is the central particle? Right? Well, what's this really all about? Joseph Campbell, a long time ago, said that what it's about is the inner quest, the quest for the inner center. And that all of this points us not outward, but inward, if we understand it correctly. And in his book, he talks about the hero quest, the hero journey, and he says, "We have not even to risk the adventure alone, for the heroes of all time have gone before us. The labyrinth is thoroughly known. We have only to follow the thread of the hero path, and where we had thought to find an abomination, we shall find a god. And where we had thought to slay another, we shall slay ourselves. Where we had thought to travel outwards, we shall come to the center of our own existence. And where we had thought to be alone, we shall be with all the world." And one of the most, I guess, what Campbell said was one of the best examples of this understanding of what it means to come to the center came from the New World. And this fellow, Black Elk, an Oglala Sioux Wichashawakan, holy man, who at 9 years old had this great vision, prophetic of the world and his own people, and thought enough of John Neihardt, that poet from Nebraska who was interested in studying the ghost dance movement and Native Americans. And Black Elk told his vision that he had when he was 9 years old, and told his life story to Neihardt. It was published in 1931 or 32, and there's an original cover of the book, Black Elk Speaks, which later went on to become famous and a bestseller. And at the central point in his vision, which is it's a marvelous thing, chapter 3 of the book, and the climax of the vision takes place, and there's that picture that Black Elk himself drew of himself at the climax of his vision. He sees himself standing on the central mountain of the world. He says, "Then I was standing on the highest mountain of them all, and round about beneath me was the whole hoop of the world. And while I stood there, I saw more than I can tell, and I understood more than I saw. For I was seeing in a sacred manner the shapes of all things in the spirit, and the shape of all shapes, as they must live together like one being. And I saw that the sacred hoop of my people was one of many hoops that made one circle, wide as daylight and as starlight. And in the center grew one mighty flowering tree to shelter all the children of one mother and one father. And I saw that it was holy." So in that vision, he brings together the three prime symbols, the three prime archetypes, geometric symbols of the center, the circle, the world mountain, and the world tree. He mentions all three. They all come together in his vision. And there's one of my favorite sayings of his, there's the power of the hoop. The power of the world always works in circles, he says, and everything tries to be round. And there are some more sacred circles. It is a universal symbol, of course. And the sacred tree that he was talking about was a cottonwood tree, which was used in that ceremony, the tribal ceremony that was common to most of the Plains tribes of the Sundance, where a certain number of volunteers that would cut down the cottonwood, put it in the center of a circle, and fast and pray and dance around that tree for 3 days and 3 nights from sun up till sundown. And then on the third day would be what they called the piercing, where the volunteer would lay down on the ground and have those 4 incisions cut in the flesh of his chest, and have those 2 pegs inserted in those incisions, and then have rope tied around those 2 pegs, tied to the tree of life. And then at the at the climax of that ceremony, he would have to run very fast backwards so that he would break those pegs. That was pretty painful. And that the idea there was that was a birth giving. That was an imitation of what woman has to go through in giving birth. So man was putting himself, men literally, the masculine power was putting itself in accord with the nature power, with the female power, the feminine power. And that was the function of that ceremony, and that's the reference to the sacred tree. So according to Black Elk, what's it like being at the center? The experience of being at the center is wholly and ineffably mysterious. In the language of Lakota, it's Wakan. It is the point of greatest power and ultimate reality. It is the beginning and end, the alpha and omega of existence. And as Black Elk described it, it's the direct personal experience of total harmony and total unity. That word keeps recurring in his speech, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. And in his vision, he saw himself in the Black Hills of South Dakota, standing on what used to be called Harney Peak, recently renamed for Black Elk, which I think is appropriate because General Harney was a notorious Indian killer. It was only, I think, about a year or two ago that they renamed the mountain in honor of Black Elk. And there's that important statement which occurs as a footnote in chapter 3. And what Black Elk said to Neihart was this. Black Elk said that the mountain that he stood upon in his vision was Harney Peak in the Black Hills. But anywhere is the center of the world, he said. Anywhere is the center of the world. You don't have to go to Harney Peak to experience the center. So, I think this is the central realization of all the great visionaries. There's a modern visionary, Anita Moorjani, near-death experiencer, and I came across this quotation in her book. She says, "My answers are inside of me, and yours lie within you too. Everything that seemingly happens externally is occurring in order to trigger something within us, to expand us, and to take us back to who we truly are." There's another quote that I really like because she gives it a sense, it's almost a physical sense. It's a really tactile experience as she describes it. She says, "What I mean by being centered is experiencing being at the center of my cosmic web, being aware of my position. This is really the only place any of us ever are, and it's important to feel our centrality at the core of it, at the center of oneness." So again, in language very similar, if not identical, to what Black Elk was saying. And there's Byron Katie saying very much the same thing, another visionary. "The center of the universe is wherever you are, and it's everywhere. It's the neutral part of the mind, that which does not take sides. The center, which is absolutely sane, undivided, and free, is the heart." Tinka Klein is a Swiss woman who was, she's not only a near-death experiencer, she had been a concentration camp survivor. And I want to play you a little YouTube where she talks about this, because one of the things that she came to understand is that you don't need to go anywhere.
Een tweede bijna doodervaring heb ik dus gehad toen ik 54 was. Nou, het was een hartstikke hete zomer en ik had een oude fiets. Zo oud dat ik dacht van, nou, ik moet er geen ongeluk mee krijgen dat die rem of wat dan ook het niet doet. Ik ben toe aan een nieuwe fiets, maar met het idioot idee van ik wil geen ongeluk krijgen. En ik had jarenlang geworsteld met gezondheidsproblemen en daarbij een alternatieve arts, een orthomoleculair arts, had ik heel veel hulp ontvangen. En op een gegeven moment had hij zijn fiat gegeven. Zo, het gaat goed, ik hoef je niet meer terug te zien. En toen wou ik mezelf die fiets geven. En ik ga naar de fietshandelaar en ik koop een fiets. En een hele happening voor me, het was mijn eerste nieuwe fiets. En ik sta bij de grote verkeersweg rustig te wachten tot het groen voor mij is. En het is groen. Ik kijk nog even naar links of er een auto aankomt. Nee, er komt geen auto aan, alles staat netjes stil. Ik steek over, ik ben op een derde van de weg en ik zie uit mijn ooghoek een auto aankomen suizen. En ik denk, dit is het. Ik kon er niet meer ontwijken. En wat er daarna in het ongeluk gebeurt, weet ik alleen van de getuigenverklaring. Ik weet dus niets van ongeluk zelf, maar volgens de getuigen ben ik aangereden. X aantal meters door de lucht gevlogen, toen met mijn rug op de motorkap en mijn nek achterover. Toen weer van de motorkap af en weer een x aantal meters door de lucht. Plat met mijn rug op de grond. Weet ik allemaal niet. Ik weet wel dat ik op een gegeven moment al liep voor ik weer bij bewustzijn was. Dat was heel gek. Ik was al een paar meter verwijderd van waar mijn fiets op de grond lag, voor ik me realiseerde dat ik liep. Op een gegeven moment ben ik naar huis gebracht. En kwam de huisarts en die zei, nou Tienke, het is geluk dat je er nog bent. Maar ik weet wel dat ik op een gegeven moment, toen ik las wat er gebeurd was, dat er een laaiende woede in mijn hoofd schoot. Dat ik mijn leven op dat moment kunnen verliezen vanwege gewoon een kippendrifje van iemand anders. En ik was zo ontzettend boos dat ik naar mijn gevoel met mijn vuisten op God zijn borst sloeg. Zo van, dat kan je niet maken. Het gaat net goed met me. Ik heb net mijn verjaardag gekregen dat ik niet meer terug hoef te komen. En nou dit. En van het ene moment op het andere schoot ik uit mijn lichaam. En was ik helemaal niet meer boos. En was ik weer in die ruimte die ik als thuis ervaar. Maar nu was die niet donker, die vriendelijke nacht. Maar hij was stralend licht. En er was een energie die door alles heen ging. Ook door mij. Hoewel ik op dat moment dus niet meer het gevoel had dat ik in mijn lichaam was. Ik was niet meer in mijn lichaam. Maar ik was totaal die energie. En die energie was ook alles tegelijk. In de zin van, die energie was liefde. En die energie was wijsheid. Die energie was dynamiek. En ik had het gevoel alsof ik als door osmose alles in me op. Ik nam die liefde in me op. Ik nam die dynamiek in me op. Ik nam die wijsheid in me op. Ik had het gevoel alsof ik op allerlei vragen antwoord kreeg in no time. En ik was zo gelukkig. Zo ontzettend gelukkig. En ik kan niet zeggen hoe lang ik daar geweest ben. Ik heb me totaal volgedronken. En echt ook met het gevoel van, ik heb in mijn leven altijd gebrek aan energie gehad. Omdat mijn lichaam dus zo beschadigd uit het kamp is gekomen. En ik heb geen tekort aan energie wat betreft de spirit. Daar heb ik overvloedige energie in. Maar het fysieke lijfje hangt er een beetje achteraan. En dat wordt ook steeds beter trouwens. En, maar die energie die aan de andere kant is, dat was voor mij het mooiste wat ik ooit had ervaren. Dat leven zo kan zijn. En ik wist wel dat ik niet in mijn lichaam was. Dus in zekere zin, wij zeggen leven en dood. Ik was niet dood, maar ik was niet in mijn lichaam. En ik wou niet terug. En op een gegeven moment voelde ik eigenlijk zo'n soort samentrekken. En toen besefte ik dat ik terug moest naar mijn lichaam. En ik kreeg 2 zinnen mee. En de ene was, mensen hebben lief voor zover ze kunnen. Het lijkt een dooddoener. Maar het is het helemaal niet. En de tweede zin was, you don't need to go anywhere. Je hoeft nergens naartoe. En toen was het als een versnelling, als een soort zandloper. Trok die energie zich samen. En ging ik door een heel nauw kanaal naar beneden. En dat was echt diep verdriet. Want ik voelde, terwijl dat kanaal zich vernauwde, dat die adem van die energie en van die dynamiek, dat die afnam. En ik voelde dat die liefde, hoe lager ik kwam, hoe meer structuren er kwamen. En hoe meer structuren er kwamen, hoe meer de liefde het raam uitvloog, de energie het raam uitvloog. En de dynamiek het raam uitvloog. En dan was ik plotseling in mijn lichaam. In alle pijn van dat lichaam. En toch bleef die resonantie die ik had meegemaakt, die bleef volop in me vibreren. En ik probeerde daar iets van te vertellen aan mijn omgeving. Maar mijn dochter zei, mam, doe niet zo euforisch. En er zaten mensen om mijn bed heen. En ze praten. En ik dacht, ze praten, maar ze zeggen niks. Wat ze zeggen is niks. Over wat ze zullen doen, wat ze gaan doen, wat ze gedaan hebben. Wat ze niet gedaan hebben, wat ze zullen doen, wat ze niet zullen doen. Hoe ze met vakantie gaan. En het was niks. Het had geen inhoud. En ik voelde me ongelooflijk alleen. En toen begon die zin van mensen hebben lief voor zover ze kunnen. Begon aan de deur te kloppen. Dat mijn alleengevoel ook een signaal was dat ik meer van ze verwachtte. En dat ik moest aanvaarden dat mensen lief hebben voor zover ze kunnen. You don't need to go anywhere. Dat betekende dat ik volledig ben. Ik ben vrijheid. Ik hoef het niet te veroveren. Niemand kan het van me afnemen. Ik ben het. En ik hoef ook nergens naartoe om die vrijheid terug te winnen. Ik had beseft aan de andere kant, toen ik daar nog was, had ik een overzicht over mijn leven gekregen. Ook in één flits, om mijn hele leven. Een soort holografische eenheid dat je je hele leven kunt overzien in één ogenblik. En ik zag dat ik eigenlijk sinds ik uit het kamp gekomen was, altijd geprobeerd had uit het kamp te komen. Ik had zoveel beperkingen meegemaakt. Ik had het gevoel dat ik me daar alsmaar van bevrijden moest. En dat wordt je ook aangepraat, wil ik niet zeggen, want ik heb een stuk therapie meegemaakt, langdurig therapie meegemaakt, om de emotionele, psychische schade van die geweldstraumata ook na te kan, om daarmee om te leren gaan. Maar in essentie ligt onder al die traumata, daar ligt gewoon je bodem. En die zielenbodem, die kan niemand van je afnemen. Die vrijheid van die ziel kan niemand van je afnemen. Ook een kamp niet. En elke keer word ik dus gewekt in mijn leven aan die allereerste oorsprong, die elke beperking te boven gaat. Maar ik ben ook mens om er vaak zo een beetje eronder te zitten en dan krijg ik weer een schop van oh ja, ik vergeet het weer. En zo gaat dat.
So, in her experience, the center, the soul, is that source which transcends every limitation, and you don't have to go anywhere. It's always there, wherever you are. But we don't always listen to it. And so, what does it mean to answer the call of the soul? What does it mean to refuse the call of the soul? There's a picture of one of our refusers. You see how happy he is. Joe Campbell talked about this. He called this one of the great mythological themes, refusal of the call. He says, the refusal of the summons converts the hero's adventure into its negative. The subject loses the power of significant affirmative action and becomes a victim to be saved. His flowering world becomes a wasteland, even though, like King Minos, he may, through titanic effort, succeed in building an empire of renown. Whatever house he builds, it will be a house of death, a labyrinth of cyclopean walls to hide from him his Minotaur. And Minos' Minotaur, of course, is who? Minos, his soul. Jesus in the Gnostic Gospel says the same thing. In that Gospel dug up in 1948, Gospel according to Thomas, this quote, I love this quote, he says, if you bring forth what is within you, he tells his disciples, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. So not answering the call of the soul has consequences. Even Black Elk experienced this. He did not speak of his vision for 10 years. He kept it to himself. He didn't think himself worthy. he refused the call to become a holy man and to become what he was. And so he was beset by voices that would appear to him, to speak to him in thunderstorms, and he was beset by what he called the compelling fear. His parents finally, when he was 17 years old, called in an old shaman by the name of Black Road. And, the old saying, when all else fails, you do the right thing. So Black Elk finally had to tell someone about his vision. He told Black Road what happened and explained it all to him. And Black Road said, nephew, I know now what the trouble is. You must do what the bay horse in your vision wanted you to do. You must do your duty and perform this vision for your people upon earth. Then the fear will leave you. But if you do not do this, something very bad will happen to you. So again, the consequences of not answering the call, of not listening, of not looking for one's own center are serious indeed. There's another favorite quote of mine from one of my favorite writers, from his novel Damien. I wanted only to try to live in accord with the promptings which came from my true self. Why was that so very difficult? And that appears as the frontispiece in Hesse's own words in that book, and it also appears out of the mouth of the main character, Emil Sinclair, who was originally listed as the author of that book. And there, again, Stan Groff, modern consciousness research, saying the same thing as all of these great sources, mystics, where he writes in one of his books, he says, true courage lies in the willingness to undergo this awesome process of self-confrontation. Unless the individual succeeds in finding his or her true identity, that is the soul within, any attempts to give meaning to life by manipulating the outside world and externality will be a futile and ultimately self-defeating quixotic crusade. Which brings us, of course, back here. Because what is it that we do, right? I mean, this is the thing. I mean, Bob recognized this a long time ago. He understood what the Great Barrier was, and that fear of oneself, of finding one's true self, which is both our highest challenge and our highest reward. But there are things that stand and get in the way. And he dedicated himself to trying to find a way around those barriers, right? And from Far Journeys, a couple of statements about the programs, how Gateway evolved into a unique process of self-exploration and discovery. It first surmounts the fear barrier of the unknown, of change. It seems to be the greatest cultural, and I would add psychological, restraint on individual growth. And with the fear barrier dissolved, then one of the greatest gifts to the human species comes into full play, curiosity. With the tools provided, the participant is then free to do as he wishes, to find that freedom, which, as Tinka Klein said, is always there underneath everything. And there's an old friend, Russ Russell, talking about this from his experience here. He says, it's rather as if I had been living most of my life in a room without realizing that the curtains were closed. Gradually, they were drawn back, and I was able to get a glimpse of what I had been missing. And he wrote that statement in that book, The Vast Inquiring Soul, which I heartily recommend. And you might ask yourself the question, well, how vast is the vast inquiring soul? And for an answer to that question, I turn back to Heraclitus, the ancient Greek philosopher, who said that you would not find out the boundaries of the soul even by traveling every path, so deep, bathun in Greek, a measure does it have. So if you traveled along every path and you couldn't find the boundaries of it, that means it's what? It's boundless, right? It's infinite. There's no boundaries. So everything is indeed one, right? Inner and outer are one, up and down are one, the beginning and the end are one, and everything is one. So when we go within, we are also going without. So when we look for the center out there, as long as we recognize that we're also looking for the center in here, we'll never be alone. As Joe Campbell said, we shall be with all the world. Thank you very much.